In the words of our psalm this morning, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts bring us closer to Thee, O Lord, my strength and my protector. Amen. Amen. Good morning. I had hoped to wear my kilt today. It wraps around like a skirt and it fitted fine. But sitting in my closet was the belt. I don't know what had happened. It seems to have shrunk. Maybe it was all that Halloween candy. So I'm reduced to wearing my Armstrong tartan tie. I must say it inspires me to be with you on this fine fall Sunday. May my words in turn be an inspiration for you. Let me begin with a question, a somewhat challenging question. What does God want of us? What is He expecting of you and me and all of our neighbors in today's topsy-turvy world? What is His call to us? Let's look at our gospel reading to get started on this conversation. Andrew was a fisherman, as you recall, but he gave up his trade to become one of Jesus' most trusted followers. God had a simple ask: go forth and proclaim the radical vision that Jesus brought to the world. So for some 30 years after Jesus was crucified, Andrew went out and evangelized in what is now Turkey and Ukraine and Russia. But his teachings undermined traditional pagan customs and beliefs in Roman gods. The Roman governors particularly disliked that he called citizens to worship someone other than the Emperor Nero. One of the governors in Greece told him, "Renounce your faith." Of course, God's call to Andrew was to stand firm in that faith, so he refused and willingly became a martyr. Andrew and his disciples were hard-working, dedicated, faithful servants of God. They responded to a challenging call from God with enthusiasm and courage. Most important, they were close to each other. Brothers who knew each other, supported each other. They were a perfect model of what it is to hear a call from God and to follow it. Here at St. Andrew's every year, basically on the third Sunday of November, we hear that story of Andrew. That call to drop everything, that call to follow Jesus and to join a small band of disciples and start fishing for people is a bit jarring for us. What would I do? What would you do if we heard God calling us on a new, challenging ministry? Even more unsettling, though, is a deeper, more nagging concern that many of us have. We do not hear God calling. We may be called to a career as a banker, a doctor, a poet, an artist, a software engineer, and perhaps called to look after family, parents, and children. But we may not hear a call to serve God. What do we do then? That question inspires deep reflection, even soul-searching, and it's the question that I want to explore this morning. Many years ago, before I came to Madison, I went to a small church in Weston. One Sunday during coffee hour, I pondered that question with a fellow parishioner. Let me call her Edna. I'm a baptized Episcopalian, Edna said, and a Christian believer. But I have a family to take care of and a career. I'm an attorney and I serve my clients. I volunteer as much as I can, but serving Jesus is just not a top priority. I just don't feel drawn. I'm certainly not called to evangelize. I am no St. Andrew. So, am I a lukewarm Christian destined to go straight to hell? She laughed, and I laughed along with her. Now, Edna answered her own question with some traditional theology. Conventional Christian wisdom tells me that God's approval, God's grace flows not from works, but from faith. So I guess I'm covered, she said, or laughter. But at the same time, I find that theology a bit of a cop-out. I really would like to do more, but what is God calling me to do? What a profound but common dilemma, I thought. So many of us are Christian believers, but not Christian doers. I asked myself, what does God want of us lay Sunday-only churchgoers? Let's first consider a related question. Where do you find God in your life? For me, trips to Iona and my interest in Celtic spirituality provide one possibility. The Celts were hunters and fishermen. They lived off the land and the sea. They found God everywhere, in the sea, in the soil, in the forest, in the rain, and in the storm. They heard God calling them to preserve and protect the natural world because that's where God lived. Like Andrew and the disciples, they heard a call and they lived it out, serving God in their everyday work. But for us today, unless you're a farmer, a sea captain, or an environmentalist, there's more to our lives than sea, sky, soil, and air. In my mind, these elements are just building blocks of a house where we live. And it's the people inside the house that matter the most. And hey, if God inhabits our natural world, it follows that God must also live within us people as well. I know this is a radical view, but in my mind, each of us is blessed with a holy and sacred and divine spark. God is not only with us, he is in us. And that leads to a final important conclusion. The Celts found God in the air, the sea, the sky, so they tended with special care the natural world surrounding them. In turn, with the heart of God beating within us, we must care for one another and love one another where God lives. Oh my, I think I've just tripped over the golden rule. God calls us to love one another as ourselves. And you know something? We're back where we started. As Edna observed, caring for everyone that we know, loving our neighbor as much as we love our family, can be a task too far, a burdensome task. It can lead to anxiety, panic, and even burnout. But let us not despair. Let me describe a path forward. Somewhere beyond faith, beyond our belief in God and Christ, somewhere beyond works, beyond caring for the disadvantaged, offering loving kindness to friends and family, beyond all that lies a quiet yearning to relate to one another, to bond with each other, to be companions for each other. And I think God's call to us is to strengthen those bonds. Now, theologians and non-religious thinkers warn us, though, that we're failing here. I think in particular about David Brooks, the journalist, author, and cultural commentator. In his recent book, he exhorts us to get better at knowing each other instead of thinking inwardly about what we are about to say. We need to be looking outward, trying to understand the person that we are interacting with, working to figure out what thoughts, feelings, ideas are in their head. Engage with them, he says. Talk less, listen more. The aim is to know that person for who they are and for them to know us. And oh yes, forget judgment, choose understanding. Thinkers like Brooks do not see this in a religious context. But remember, I see God living within each of us. Therefore, to know another person is to know God. To know another person is to know God. Back to my friend Edna for a moment. Edna was a plain dresser, no dangly earrings or stuff like that. But on her left thumb, she wore a man's wedding ring. I suspected there was a story there, so I asked her about it. No one has ever bothered to ask. It was my father's, she said. He was a sergeant in the Army. He died in Vietnam when I was 12. And I shared with her that my father died when I was 12. Then we both know the sadness of losing a father at a young age, she said. I teared up, and Edna began to weep. I reached out and put my hand on her cheek, and I met her gaze. And in that moment, we connected. And right there, I saw the face of God. I knew Edna, and she knew me. And looking back, I'm reminded that God is calling us to find more moments like that. I'm reminded of Andrew and his friends. They listened to each other. They knew each other. They too must have seen God in each other. So I close with one more story and a prayer. I taught at a private school years ago, fresh out of college. Most mornings the school gathered for chapel, a hymn, a reading, a prayer. Teachers offered the prayer, often borrowing from the BCP, but tradition also encouraged original prayer. So this morning I offer you a prayer of mine that I used in those days. Gracious God, help us to hear that we may be heard. Help us to feel that we may be felt. Help us to see that we may be seen, and help us to know that we may be known. And I say, Amen.